Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode. Okay, this one, you're going to want to buckle your seatbelt. You're going to hear a lot of stats, you're going to hear a lot of information, and it's really, really important as parents and grandparents for us to understand the truth about this topic. This one's going to make us think, this one's going to challenge us. There's a lot of confusing just rhetoric and conversation around the topic of school choice. So today, I have with me Corey DeAngelis. He has been actually labeled the school choice evangelist. He is so knowledgeable. His background is incredible. I'm going to share just a little bit of what Corey has done. Corey frequently appears on the Wall Street Journal. He's a regular on Fox News. He's the executive director at Education Freedom Institute. He's a senior advisor at Accuracy in Media, which I know we all love. He's just got a long list of history and experience with a lot of credentialed organizations and institutes. The bottom line is he knows his stuff. Here's why I think this conversation is important, because a lot of us really don't understand the nuances of school choice. We're scared it's going to take everything away from the public schools and the public schools as a whole are going to fail. Or we're talking so much about our tax dollars that we're forgetting this is actually about students. The reality is school choice raises the bar for everyone. It raises the water and all the boats rise, but we don't really understand how. You don't maybe know what's happening in your own state or the states around you. Say, we don't know what to ask for and what to fight for. Well, today you're going to learn. So let's lean in and be informed. Corey, thank you so much for being on with me today. I'm really excited about this conversation, passionate about it. So thanks for being on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Well, and we're going to go deep into school choice. But before we do that, will you just give people a little bit of your background, who you are, but also how did you get into the school choice space? How did you land here?
Yeah, I actually started as a researcher. I did my Ph.D. in education policy at the University of Arkansas. And my first study made a national splash. It was actually linking the Milwaukee private school choice program to a later life outcome that was understudied, whether you were involved in the criminal justice system. And lo and behold, we found that all else equal, after making apples to apples comparisons, if you had an opportunity to go to a private school using a scholarship in Milwaukee, starting with their program in 1990, by the time these students became about 20 to 30 years of age, we're able to see huge reductions in the likelihood of crime. So I was always interested in the school choice angle, not really based on test score effects, but based on how it could help the child later on in life. So that could be through getting a better job, that could be avoiding crime, which was really important, and just parents getting to pass down their values to their children and not sending their kids to a school where they feel like they're being indoctrinated and things that are pushing against everything that they're trying to do at home. And so that was more recent. But even before that, I did my bachelor's and master's in economics. And I always saw the school system through the lens of an economist. And the main problem that I see is that there's so much monopoly power that you're assigned to a school for the most part based on where you live. And if you don't have a school choice program, it's basically you have no recourse if the school doesn't do a good job. They'll tell you to go complain to the school board, but we saw how well that worked during the COVID years. I mean, they called parents domestic terrorists for complaining about left-leaning agendas in the schools when they weren't focused on the basics. They were focused on activism as opposed to academics. And some parents had their mics cut off when they were complaining about gender ideology in the schools. 100%. They just wanted the schools to focus on math and reading and writing. They weren't doing that. And so if you have competition, if families can vote with their feet and go somewhere else, then the school boards have an incentive to treat you like a customer. They'll do a better job. And so I see the government school system today, one, as a socialist experiment that has failed, but two, as a monopoly that has no incentive to do the right thing or to spend money wisely. That's why we've seen over time, as we've increased per student spending by 170% since 1970 in real terms, after adjusting for inflation, the outcomes haven't gotten 170% better. The teachers aren't seeing 170% higher paychecks. It goes towards the administrators, the superintendents, and the teachers' union bosses who make over $500,000 a year. So I think when the money follows the child, and we've seen evidence of this, the public schools have upped their game in response to competition. It's a rising tide that lifts all boats. And that's a little bit of my background and how I started getting interested in this topic, because we don't do this with anything else in society.
True.
We're not assigned to grocery stores based on where we live.
That's such a great point.
So why did we do it with the schools? It makes no sense.
That's right. You touched on something even in that answer with government schools. And a lot of people now, instead of saying public schools, are calling them government schools. And I would love for you, I've sort of heard you break this down, and I think it's just an important, when we hear that, sometimes we're like, that's, someone's saying that, or they're being snarky, or, whatever the case. But will you just break down why that's important and what we're getting at when you say government schools versus a public school?
Yeah, people don't like when you tell the truth, because the truth hurts sometimes. And they are government schools. They're run by the government. They are funded by the government, or at least the taxpayer, that the government takes your money from you and uses to funnel to the schools. They are regulated by the government. They are operated directly by the government. They are assigned by the government, and they're compelled by the government through compulsory education laws. They're not public in any meaningful sense of the word. They're not a public good, as an economist would put it, because they are rivalrous and excludable. And they do exclude kids. If you don't live on the right side of the district boundary, they tell you good luck. Some families have actually gone to jail for lying about their address to get their kids into better so-called public schools. It's not like a public park where anybody can access it. They are very exclusive. And I live in San Antonio, Texas, and in the district right next to me, it's called Alamo Heights. They're one of the better known districts of being higher quality, but they charge people tuition for the privilege of sending their kids to their school as a public school. It sounds kind of private to me. If you live on the wrong side of the district boundary, you can transfer in.
You can pay to get in.
You pay twice. You pay for the school you're not using through property taxes. You pay again out of pocket $10,000 a year to go to the school district. That doesn't sound like a public school. They're not accountable to the public, because they just tell you to go complain to the board, which doesn't want to listen to you unless you agree with them. They'll call you a domestic terrorist. They'll cut off your mic. And so this doesn't seem like anything that resembles the word public to me. And so government is just being a more accurate descriptor. And a lot of people don't like this, and their knee-jerk reaction to me calling them government schools is to say, oh no, why would you say that? Well, it's because they are run by the government, and you should ask yourself why the truth hurts so much. And it's probably because most people know that when government does anything in life, they do a bad job, and they're doing a bad job with the school system today. It's just like the DMV. It takes forever. They're inefficient. They waste a ton of money. In the school system today, we're spending about $20,000 per student per year. That's about 30 to 40% higher than average private school tuition in this country. And for what? We spend more than any other country on the planet, and we're getting mediocre results at best. When you look at the PISA international assessments, we're doing a bad job. It's embarrassing. And I think the way that we advance forward is look to other countries, even like Finland. They have a nationwide school choice program. Why should you be assigned to a school based on where you live? It's inequality is baked into the system, and it's stealing our money to use to a system that may or may not be doing a good job for our kids. And we saw this during COVID when they fought to close the schools. Parents saw that they weren't focused on the basics. They were indoctrinating kids. And Vodi Bakum said it best: we cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is, Suzanne, a lot of parents are not surprised anymore, and now they're voting with their feet like we've never seen before. There have been 1 million kids that have left the government school system at least since 2019, and homeschooling has essentially doubled according to the U.S. Census Bureau's latest data. So this is it's almost like they've stepped on a rake. It's their own fault. And I blame the teachers unions, but that doesn't mean we should blame the teachers. The teachers are getting the short end of the stick. It's the union bosses who push their politics that are the problem.
So tell me a little bit about, when we say school choice, and I know you're a big proponent of the dollars following the student, but there are a lot of different ways to look at school choice. And when we talk about school choice, it looks different in different states. That there's legislation that's passing at a pretty incredible rate across the country, but you're the expert on this. Tell us a little bit about how many states, what it's looking like, what types of school choice, because I think sometimes parents think it's a one size fits all, and it's absolutely not. And so just kind of a broad sweep about what could this look like, and then where is it really happening, and what's some of the fruit that you're seeing?
Yeah, Suzanne, we're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning. Almost. It's happening in some states, but not others. But we've had 17 states pass universal school choice in the past 4 years alone. So in the past 4 years, we've had more advancement on school choice than in the preceding 4 decades combined. We've gone from 0 to 100 real quick on the issue. And it is because the unions closed the schools. They held children's education hostage for ransom payments from taxpayers. They received about $190 billion in so-called COVID relief starting in March of 2020. That's more than the U.S. dedicated to rebuild Europe in the Marshall Plan after World War II. I mean, so it was a ton of money that they dedicated to trying to open the schools, but they used a lot of that money on all their political pet projects that they already wanted to begin with. They just hired more people. It wasn't used for safety. It was used for their political agenda. And we had 0 states with universal school choice in 2020. Now we have 17. And so it's a lot of momentum. And it's because parents who thought their kids were in good public schools or government-run schools, they saw that, well, the A ranking from the state isn't capturing all of what it means to have a high quality school. Yeah, you could have high standardized test scores, but not when they dumb down what it means to have an A. And they just have so much grade inflation going in the public school system today. But also families saw that they want their kids to have an education that's aligned with their values. They want the school to complement what they're doing to raise their children at home. And they saw in too many cases through remote learning, which we should have just been real and called it remotely learning. There wasn't a lot of learning going on.
That's true.
But over Zoom school, families saw that they were focused more on the LGBTs than the ABCs. And that's not a knock on LGBT people. I'm just saying the schools were focused more on activism as opposed to just improving math, reading, and writing. And some parents who are pro gender ideology might even want to talk about those things that are sensitive topics at home, as opposed to teachers in the classroom who, if they're not doing a good job with math, reading, and writing, why should we trust them to do even more sensitive topics like anything else that's been blowing up in the news, all these political topics that parents aren't happy about. So that is why we've seen so much momentum. And the different forms of school choice, the basic idea is that I pointed out earlier that the status quo today is that you live where you live and you're assigned to a school that's run by the government just based on where you live. And if you want to go somewhere else, you basically have to pay twice. Or you can move houses, which is very costly. Even if you have enough money to move houses, why would you want to get up and move houses to be assigned to a new school? I mean, just imagine if we did that with grocery stores, they would have food poisoning every month. You'd complain to them and they'd say, oh, we'll do better next time. Just give us more money. And, if you don't like it, you can go complain to the board and we won't listen to you if you disagree with us. And look, socialist control of the food supply has caused mass starvation over time throughout history. And the socialist control of the school system today, the government control of school systems, has led to mass starvation when it comes to a high quality of education for kids. And so this is the different forms of school choice are basically any policy that allows you to direct the money that's meant for educating your child, which we spend $20,000 per kid per year in the public school system today in America, nationwide. You could take a fraction of that money, or maybe even all of it, to another provider. That could be a charter school, which those are defined as public schools on paper all across the country. 47 or so states have charter school laws on the books.
And they're growing,
but
right?
And they are seeing, while the traditional public schools, the government-run institutions saw a decrease in enrollment over the past few years, charter schools have seen a slight uptick. I want to say about a 4% increase since 2019 in enrollment. So it's not a huge increase, but it is a big deal that you're seeing people vote with their feet to charters, away from the government-run institutions, because they have an incentive to do a good job. They have to cater to the needs of their customers. No one's assigned to a charter school. They have to attract people and say, look, we have to do a good job. And a lot of the times, I did some research at the University of Arkansas showing that across different cities across the country that have charter schools, they were receiving about 80% of what the government-run schools were receiving per student. So they're being shortchanged 20% less of the money, and they're doing a better job academically. And then obviously on other metrics as well, parents are more satisfied with these schools. Why do you think they're choosing them over the alternative? So that's just the basic form of school choice. But you could also imagine systems like we now have in Arizona, Florida, Texas just passed the bill. One of the 17 that I'm referring to is that the money can also follow you in the form of a scholarship to also go to a private run institution.
That's what I wonder.
A totally private, and even a religious school.
Is that one of the main ways that you're seeing parents like that's what they want? Is that the ultimate? I just give me my money and I want to go wherever I want to go.
I would say that's the purest form of education freedom, or what most people call school choice, is that we're already spending the money. It might as well go to the student, not the system. It should go to the individual, not the institution. It should go to the kids, not the buildings. And so that money we spend, we're not touching it. We're not changing the amount that we're spending overall. We're just redirecting it from the school system to allow the student to vote with their feet to the provider that works best. That could be a private school, could be a charter school. Hey, it could even be your assigned government school. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school for real this time, unlike
or go
with
across
your
the
doctor.
street.
Or
go across the street.
And so it
too.
could be a different public school. Exactly. Yeah. And so I just wanted to point out real quick before we shift topics is that we already do this with higher education. So students already use Pell Grants for higher education. It's taxpayer dollars. You could use it for the nearby community college if you want, but you don't have to. You can choose it to go to a different university that's a public one. You could also, or a state school, you could also choose to take that Pell Grant to a private school, even a religious university. We do this with pre-K. Think about the federal Head Start program, whether you like it or not. They have the taxpayer money. States do this as well. Tennessee has a statewide pre-K program, for example, and that money can go to a private, religious, even pre-K provider that's chosen by the parents. So why is it all of a sudden different when the kid goes from 4 years old or 3 years old to 5 years old, and then all of a sudden it's a big deal? You can't, oh no, we have to have public money for public schools. It can't go anywhere else. It's because that choice is the norm with pre-K and higher ed, but choice threatens an entrenched special interest, the teachers union, the superintendent's union, only when it comes to the in-between years of K to 12 education. So they fight as hard as possible to keep hold of that money because they don't want anybody taking it anywhere else. And so you can imagine if we had assigned government pre-Ks, those same interest groups would be against the Head Start program that allows you to take it somewhere else because they want to continue to hold on to that money regardless of whether the parent's happy or whether the kid's doing well. In Chicago, for example, they have 55 public schools with not a single kid proficient in math, 0% proficiency rates. They spend $30,000 a child. Their president of their union, Stacey Davis Gates, called school choice racist last year, but now we found out she sends her own kid to a private school. And so she knows she's running failure factories, but keeps her own kid away from them. And it's great that she has that opportunity, but she shouldn't pull up the ladder from behind herself and fight against educational opportunities for others, especially when we're already spending the money. The money is meant for the kid. It belongs to the kid. It doesn't belong to the school system. It doesn't belong to the private schools either. It belongs to the families, and they should be able to pick private, but if not, they should be able to pick public charter, government-run schools, or that you could also use it in a lot of these states for homeschooling. And so you could use it for homeschool curriculum, tutoring, textbooks. It doesn't have to be used at a brick and mortar school. And I just visited a school in Sebring, Florida, in the middle of a rural area, actually. And I think all of their kids were using their Florida scholarship program to access the school. And it was actually in the middle of nature. They're using Waldorf style curriculum. They have goats on the campus.
I've actually heard about this school.
Yeah, it's called the Academy at the Park, and it's a really cool place. And they might learn about physics one day, and then they go out and make bows and arrows in order to apply the concepts that they're learning in the classroom to the real world, which I think that's really how the human brain works. You have to interact with the world around you, and you have to be interested in the topic. It can't just be force-fed down your throat. So I think homeschooling is the best way to go, but at the end of the day, school choice doesn't discriminate in that way. It allows the parent to choose whether you want a brick and mortar school or if you want to go do a homeschool route. And some states allow the same amount of money to follow, whether you do homeschool or private school or the government-run school. But I do live in Texas, and we just passed a bill where it's if you go to the government-run school, they spend about $18,000 a kid in the government-run schools here in Texas. If you go to a private school and you opt out of your assigned school, only about $10,000 follows the student. And that's just how politics works. You got to create win-wins in order to get as many groups on board as possible.
Get it started.
Yeah. So I'll take half. That's a good start. But if you homeschool, you only get $2,000. And so their argument is, well, it doesn't cost as much to homeschool. It's like, don't penalize the sectors that are doing a better job at a lower cost. And look, let's say you could do it out of pocket for $2,000 a year. Think about all the things that if you could afford it, you could do for your kids to learn in other ways with the other $8,000. I mean, so you're limiting those families, penalizing them for being more efficient, which is the wrong type of incentive that you want to bake into a program. And so I'm fighting for more of that funding to follow the child. It should be equivalent. We shouldn't discriminate based on sector, but it is a good start still. I'd rather have $2,000 for homeschoolers than $0 for homeschoolers. And some states don't have school choice at all. So it's a step in the right direction. And I think it should be equal. We shouldn't punish a kid just because the traditional system's not working for them.
So I have a couple of questions. First, going back to Illinois and what's happening there. I've interviewed this mom on the podcast before, but she's on the south side of Chicago and started looking at, what's happening in terms of output and that there's no proficiency across the board, really. And when I say literally started going and knocking door to door in her neighborhood saying, I will homeschool your children. And it's literally going in the neighborhood saying, do you know what's happening? She's run for public office. It's absolutely incredible. She's got an amazing vision. There's an empty church building down the road that she would buy in a nanosecond, if she had the funds. And I think about what would be happening in that neighborhood if the money with this person who has a vision, has a passion, is doing the hard thing, if just a portion, like you said, of that money could be redirected and people weren't having to, it's just, there's so many people hungry with innovation right now. And so I love the fact that you're doing what you're doing and helping people understand what this really is, because there's so much rhetoric and conversation around the topic. And I know if I post anything about school choice, probably with the people that are following me, 80% are like, that's amazing. How do we learn more? But the 20%, it's the same, you're trying to drown out public school. It's like, no, the idea
money doesn't belong to the government schools.
It would make it better. I mean, the competition alone makes it better.
Yeah, there are 27 studies on this, 30 studies on this topic, and 27 of them find positive effects. More competition leads to better outcomes in the public school. So the fear mongering by the teachers unions has just fallen flat year after year in location after location. Take Florida, for example. They were at the bottom of the pack on the nation's report card overall. a couple decades ago before they had school choice. Since they've expanded school choice, it's now universal for everybody. They now rank at the top of the pack in the top handful of states after adjusting for differences in student demographics across states. And 10 out of 11 academic studies out of Florida have shown that this correlation is more likely to be a causal relationship, that more competition has led to better outcomes. It's been a rising tide that lifts all boats in Florida. We've seen this nationwide with 27 out of 30 studies finding the same relationship. And what you're saying is reminds me of during the COVID years, we had these things called pandemic pods, and I kind of think of them as micro schools where people are getting like 10, 12 students together in a household. And you think about that. If you had 12 students and you started a micro school, or basically re-envisioning the one-room schoolhouse, if you had the $20,000 per kid following the student, that average amount, that's about $240,000 in revenues that could more directly go to the teacher. And what's really interesting is the Washington Post actually wrote something about this during the COVID years, back before they even had a great change in their opinion team, where now they have more of a free market approach than they did before. But during COVID, they were kind of off the rails to the left. And the story they highlighted was very interesting to me, because they talked about a New Jersey public school teacher that had been in the system for decades and ended up leaving during COVID to start her own micro school. And they reported that she was making about the same amount of money, but she had a fraction of the class size, about 10 students as opposed to 40 students. She had more autonomy. And if she's leaving after decades in the school system, that tells you that this wasn't like she just started yesterday and changed her career path. She changed her entire, at a point where maybe she's even getting close towards the retirement age, thought that was a good idea. And so school choice isn't just a great opportunity for families. I mean, that's obvious. They get more choices. But then the argument is that, you must not like teachers very much. But the teachers are getting shortchanged. The district is their true enemy, not their competition. And especially because more choices for teachers means higher pay for teachers, means better benefits for teachers, means more autonomy, not as much red tape that they have to deal with in the government school system. And we have example after example after example of this. And so the money following the child, if you think about that $240,000 in revenue from 12 students in 1 year, of course you have like different costs associated with educating those kids, but you cut out a lot of the middleman. You don't need to have these superintendents that are making $400,000 a year in some cases more than the president of the United States. And that money can more directly go to the teachers themselves. So this is a win-win solution. It's good for the kids and the parents, but it's also good for the teachers who they're not seeing the money. And they've been kind of brainwashed. It's almost a form of Stockholm syndrome that their employers and their unions tell them that you need us, we don't need you. And everything that is wrong with your life is the private school, charter school, and homeschool families. But that's not the case at all, because you have teachers in private schools. Parents are teachers. They're the first and foremost educators for their kids. And at the end of the day, when the district has an incentive to do the right thing, they stop wasting so much dang money on administrative bloat. Just one piece of data that I have for you on that topic is from, I've posted this on X a few times, and Elon Musk has shared it a couple times as well, because it's actually an eye-popping number. Since 2000, we have data at the national level, at the National Center for Education Statistics. We have data on hiring trends over time and student enrollment. So since 2000, student enrollment has been flat. It's actually decreased a little bit in recent years. But over the same period, the number of teachers in the system has increased a little bit by about 10%. The number of principals and assistant principals has increased by about 40%. And the number of administrators has increased by about 95%. It's become more of a jobs program for administrators than an education initiative for kids. And the teachers aren't seeing the money. Why do they keep hiring more and more people as opposed to increasing teacher salaries? Well, it's obvious, because if you have more dues paying members in the system, you have more foot soldiers to push your political pet projects. You have a bigger lobbying group. It's a larger voting bloc. And then people like Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, they get more union dues to funnel the revenues back to their Democrat campaign coffers and their buddies running for office. They've become more of a political organization than an educational initiative. And Randy Weingarten's American Federation of Teachers funneled about 99.9% of their campaign contributions to Democrats in the last election cycle. You don't have to trust me. You look it up. It's at Open Secrets. It's been this way for decades. Nearly all of the funding has gone to Democrat campaign coffers. And even if you're a Democrat, you might not want your money out of your hard-earned paycheck going to politics. And if you wanted to do that, you could do it yourself. Right. You could make that contribution yourself. And there actually was a teacher I was listening into a radio hit in New York City. A New York City public school teacher called into a radio station out there recently, and Randy Weingarten was a guest on one of the shows. And the teacher said, you guys just endorsed this guy Mamdani. He seems to be so far out there. He's a socialist. He says he's a socialist. And I think the union's become a little bit too political. And Randy Weingarten responded with her knee-jerk reaction by saying, the union could be as political as it wants to be. And if you don't like it, then basically go take your money somewhere else. And so I think teachers should listen to Randy Weingarten's advice for once and pull their funding, stop paying these monsters at the teachers union that have become more of a political organization than anything else, and keep that money for yourself and join alternatives like the Teacher Freedom Alliance, who are offering that liability insurance that the unions normally provide for free.
That there are options.
Why would you? There are other options, and so you could still be protected. We care about teachers, but we also know a lot of teachers, they might not want to send their money to a campaign, campaign that they disagree with.
I've interviewed several who I just don't want to even be a part of that. One of the things that I think is so fascinating too over the years, having started some schools and interviewed a lot of teachers, and this was back in 2010, 11, even with the Common Core standards that came, teachers that were incredibly creative, that were in the classroom because they were creative teachers. They knew how to reach children who had all these different types of intelligences and learned in all these variety of ways. When that started to come in, we started to see people who had been teacher of the year had been in the, teaching for 25 years, come and interview at this tiny little school that we were starting and saying, because I love to teach, we weren't even being critical about the teachers unions or anything political, but because I love to teach, I'm finding that I can't actually practice my craft. I can't do it because I can't be creative, because students have to hit the same marker at the same time, the same way. And so they were getting pinned in, even with the skills that they had, they couldn't practice the skills. And so they were looking for some places that seemed very innovative, which really we were a hybrid school. It was just, we still have a classroom, but they had the freedom to really move. And so it's fascinating. I want to tell you this. You're going to love it. But I've helped start a couple of pods now in the areas. I'll help other people with creative ideas get started, or, sort of like, don't do this. We've tried that. It's not going to work. Just discipling a little bit. But a couple of pods have taken off. And so myself with a couple of friends that are in different pockets, have different skill sets, wrote what we call the pod packet. And it's a 50-page document that will tell a teacher or a parent, if you want to start something, here are all the things you just need to think through. A lot of times if you've been in the classroom for years, you're not thinking about how to start a business. And it is a business. But to your point, even in Georgia, I think they passed us sort of school
it was pretty
choice.
Watered down.
It was that's typically what happens there, where I'm from. But it's like $6,000 if you're in the bottom 20% of schools. Yeah. But even with that, if you had 12 students that brought their $6,000, I'm trying to, because that's not going to get you into a private school. That's not going to cover a hybrid school. $6,000.
Yeah. And even if you paid $1,000 out of pocket, and then supplemented the $6,000, it makes it more feasible.
Right. And so, but if you were to get, same thing, 12 parents together to bring that money, and a teacher who has already retired or who is frustrated because they're having to teach values-based therapeutic education that they don't feel qualified or don't agree with, just even if they're not making as much money, the fact that they have the freedom to do what they love to do, it has been the most phenomenal, fun thing to watch, and to be able to help someone who's never really thought about just an entrepreneurial spirit, or let me start something with the skill I have, give them a tool that walks them through and says, if you still want to teach, there's a way to do it, and do it creatively, and not putting it out to teachers that are happy and thrilled and all. But there are some incredible options for this, and parents are finding it really fun to say, we just want to have a STEM pod. We just want to have a middle school girls pod, just girls, and you can be as creative as you want to do that. And I think what we're talking about here is, if we have the financial capacity to do that, there would be even more creativity and innovation that's happening. And it's so exciting.
Yeah, and a lot of teachers recently are reporting an uptick in violent incidents in schools as well.
Very
I think the
much
FBI
so.
just put out a report on this, actually showing over 1 million crimes committed at schools in recent years, and a lot of them being physical altercations,
so.
and some of them sex offenses as well. And the teachers have their hands tied, and they think that, with all these restorative justice policies and lax discipline policies in the schools, that they can't really do anything to break it up. And even if they could, maybe they don't want to risk their lives trying to break up a fight at the school. So if you could create your own pod, have a more tight-knit community, you can expel the kids who, if anything like this happens, it's a lot less likely to happen when you can have that discipline policy in place. It's a smaller environment. Kids are getting lost in the factory model school system. And so I think you create a more cohesive environment as well, a safer environment for both the kids and the teachers at the same time. And at the end of the day, if you're safe, you're more likely to learn things and be happy at school. And a lot of kids are that use school choice programs, they complain about bullying in the public school system. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people talk about how, you need these big factory model schools because of so-called socialization, but a lot of socialization is negative. I mean, some people are having to go back to these prison-like institutions with their abusers every single day, and it's not a good environment. I mean, of course, you want to interact with other people and have positive forms of socialization. That's important in developing a human being at the early stages of their life. But at the end of the day, if the bad outweighs the good, I mean, you got to start asking yourself, what kind of alternatives do we have here? And I think that's why teachers and families are searching for these pod-like environments, homeschool-like environments. Hybrid homeschools have been on the rise recently as well, and homeschool co-ops. So, the teachers have a lot of reasons for why they want alternatives, just like parents have a lot of other reasons for why they want alternatives. And I was looking at there was a teacher actually in the union that leaked some documents to me earlier this year from the National Education Association and their annual meeting that was held in Portland, Oregon, of all places. And they used to make these things public until I exposed them a couple years ago for defeating a resolution that would have rededicated the union to being about student learning. Of course, they shot that resolution down. But this year, they hid this all from the public. It was leaked to me, but they passed all these resolutions that read more like a declaration of war on the Trump administration than anything else. Yeah. And one of the resolutions, they spent thousands of union dollars to declare President Trump a fascist. And in that same resolution, they misspelled the word fascism, of course. So it's beyond parody. And on another one, they dedicated over $200,000 of union dues to getting around a recent Supreme Court decision from Montgomery County, Maryland, called the Mahmoud decision, which now allows parents to opt their children nationwide out of gender ideology instruction. And so, some teachers might want to listen to the Supreme Court, but the union bosses in their infinite wisdom said, we're going to use your money that we already took from your paychecks to coach teachers how to get around that decision, to insert a wedge between parents and their children instead of just focusing on the basics, which the vast majority of teachers just want to do. They just want to go do their job. They want to teach kids. They want to be a good role model for children. But the union bosses have gone on this crusade against the people that they disagree with in politics. And I think that turns off a lot of teachers. Although the data that I saw earlier this week shows that there's about a 2-to-1 ratio, about twice as many teachers nationwide are registered as Democrats as opposed to Republicans. But even if you have 33% of the teachers identifying as Republicans, a lot of them, and even the Democrats, don't want to get involved in this stuff. They want to vote on their own time.
People want to be involved.
Exactly.
That's not a leap to say that's not what we're doing, and we don't want to be a part of that here.
Not to mention, I think most teachers are independents. I mean, that tells you something too. The plurality of teachers are independents, according to the latest data that I saw from Education Week. So that tells you they don't want to get involved in politics, but you have their union bosses using their money against them and forcing them to. And that's why at the Supreme Court in 2018, the Janus decision ruled that public sector unions can no longer compel teachers to pay dues because that would violate their First Amendment rights. And that can't be a condition of employment. They can't retaliate against the teachers for not joining the union. But the thing is, in a lot of these blue states like Illinois, where they've always had it this one way, the teachers union is not going to advertise to the teachers that they actually have a choice now. They're going to pretend like, again, that they are necessary and that the teachers need them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have one more question just as we sort of wrap up, and I think this is one. In fact, I know it's one because I've had people ask me, and I'd love to get your take on it just as we come to a close. So a homeschool family, and I don't think it's just a homeschool family, but would say if we take money, school choice, if the money follows us, or private schools, particularly religious private schools, that would say, man, if we take school money from school choice or from the government money, we could get backed into a corner of having to teach what we're told to teach. Can you speak to that point a little bit from a school choice, from what's actually happening in legislation? How are families and schools protected from having the threat of having to teach what they're told to teach? I think it's a great question, and a lot of people don't understand it.
Yeah, we've had school choice programs in America since the late 1800s in some cases, and we've never had a school choice program that forces families to take the money. So you can make that cost-benefit decision yourself, whether to accept the funding or not. It's all voluntary. But to get a more direct response to your question is that the argument is basically that with government shekels comes government shackles. But the reality is you can get the shackles without the shekels. They can regulate you without even giving you the opportunity to take the money. And so we've seen this throughout history. In Oregon, for example, in 1922, they outlawed private education altogether. You had to send your kid to Caesar. You had to send your kid to the government institutions. And so that wasn't because of a school choice program. It's because you had authoritarians who wanted to control the minds of other people's children. You look fast forward to today. New York requires you to take the state standardized test to homeschool your kids without any of the money attached to that decision. And so that's because they have authoritarians in office who think they know better than you. And that's not because of a school choice program. And so I will say that school choice actually reduces the likelihood of this regulation happening in a couple of ways. And politics is all about organized interest pushing for what they want. The unions have done this for a long time. But when you give families the opportunity, the choice to take that money or not, well, you can build a broader coalition to fight back against any regulations in the future. If you have more people using private and home education because you have them with school choice opportunities, well, they can lock arms if any government bureaucrat in the future says, you know what, now we're going to attach these stipulations. Well, the school choice families will be on your side to say, oh, no way, not today, Satan. You're not taking my autonomy away from us. And so we can't make perfect the enemy of the good. We don't live in utopia. And I would say school choice is the best feasible solution that we have in front of us today. and it reduces the likelihood of government encroachment in the future. And it's all voluntary. It's the choice of the parents. And I have some examples. You look at places like Ohio. They just passed universal school choice 2 years ago in 2023. In the same session, they deregulated homeschooling. Missouri last year in 2024, they passed an expansion of their private school choice program. In that same bill, they increased homeschool autonomy as well. And so in Missouri, they used to have a provision where the government school district could weaponize the sheriff's office against homeschool families and have them go investigate parents. I mean, it was crazy that was ever the law in Missouri, but it shows you in the same bill, they got rid of that regulation for homeschoolers. And then also you can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I will say the government officials who are against school choice are the same ones who walk and chew gum and also try to take your right to homeschool away. We saw this in New Jersey. They introduced a bill this year. Illinois, we saw a bill this year to clamp down on homeschoolers.
California too, I think.
Assembly Bill, I want to say 84 in California. Yep. So you had all these things happening in states that don't have school choice. So it's like, I understand the concern. I'm a libertarian. I'm an anti-government type. It's also another one of the reasons I got into this. I saw that the socialists were controlling the schools and moving our country towards a socialist direction. Why do you think Mamdani won the election in New York City? He says he's a socialist. Well, you have kids going through the school system that's run by the government, convincing them that the big government is the solution to all their problems for 13 years of their lives, for 7 hours a day. And once they get off that factory model government school conveyor belt, they're 18 years old, they're old enough to vote, and they go and, they've been fed these lies about socialism never really been tried throughout history is what they'll say. And they'll say, we just need to do it bigger next time. And so you have a person like Mamdani who calls for government control of the grocery stores, literally wins an election in a place where you have tons of kids being indoctrinated. He won the youth vote overwhelmingly. Cuomo actually won the vote among the older population. And so all this to say is that I'm on your side. Randy Weingarten is not. She's against school choice. I'm for it. And if you're on Randy Weingarten's side on this issue, you're probably on the wrong side. You're probably overthinking it. It's probably for different reasons. But we can't make perfect the enemy of the good. We can't miss the forest for the trees, especially when this is always voluntary. And if it wasn't, I'd be against it too.
Awesome. Well, you are a wealth of knowledge. You dedicated so much time and really your life to this. And so I appreciate you being on today and just sharing a deeper perspective and a little bit more so that we could grab really what's the crux of the conversation. And so thank you so much for taking the time today and being on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for talking to me, Suzanne. It's great joining you.
Okay, everybody, I know that was a lot of information. It is evident that Corey knows his stuff. He's really dedicated his life to this. And so I love the fact that he brings facts to the table. He knows the statistics. He's behind the scenes. He fights across the country in every state for school choice. And so it's hard to argue with statistics. It just is what it is. And I think sometimes we get so passionate about what this might mean or what this could mean that we don't listen to the facts. That's one of the reasons that I really wanted to have him on, is to understand at a deeper level, what are we actually really talking about for this purpose? Does it help our children? We can sort of stay on the high level of this and talk about taxes or talk about, which school or public school, all of that. But at the end of the day, are our children benefiting? Are they learning? Is this good for the family? Society is built on families, not on schools. And so if this helps a child, if it helps a family move in a direction that it's going to be good for the child's future, it's good for the culture, it's good for society's future. It's a really, really important conversation. I also think just understanding sort of the nuances of this and what's happening in different, one size doesn't fit all with school choice. And so understanding that, what is universal versus the money follows the child. Do you know what's happening in your state? Do you know what your choices are? I think it's really, really important. It's an important conversation for us. It's an important conversation for teachers. And I also love the fact that there are options. The pods, great, incredible choice that you don't have to start a school, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel and create something huge. But there are small things you can do that have a huge impact if that's something that's been put on your heart, or you know a teacher who's really looking forward to doing something creative. So anyway, big conversation, lots of things to consider. At the end of the day, we just have to do our homework. We have to stay curious and really think well about this. And when we do, it will help you parent with purpose, disciple with direction, and leave an intentional legacy.